Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guest is Karen Doonan. Karen is an author, channel, and spiritual counselor. She is known for her Truth Codes blog and her writings on how to exit the old earth. Through her work, Karen is helping humanity move through the transition and the ascension process that is now fully underway. Our conversation was wide-ranging and extremely intriguing, with Karen sharing her wealth of metaphysical knowledge and wisdom. And to kick the show off, I asked Karen about her journey in life, and here is what she had to say.
I started my journey many years ago. I'm trying to think how many. Probably about 2006 maybe, when it really started. I started in the field of alternative therapy. So I did many years training in crystals and sound and colour, vibrational medicine, things like that. And then I sort of started looking at the world from a different perspective, especially when I started doing the vibrational medicine, because everything in the universe is a frequency and everything is a vibration. So once you start looking at the world as a frequency and a vibration, you begin to see the world in a completely new way. So when I had begun the vibrational medicine course, that's when I started beginning to channel. Now, I'd never heard of channeling before, and it was sort of new to me, and it came as a bit of a shock when I was doing, you're sitting in a meditation, quite the thing, one day, doing your whole meditation and getting all the different information that you get. And then I had, I suppose you would call them energies back then, that would give me information. And then the information started being relative to things that started appearing in the world. And then I was given a lot of a push, really, to become a bit more public about it. I was okay with talking to friends and other people that worked in the field, but not putting any of the information online. And it was only when I started putting the information that I was getting through online and getting a bit of response from the general public, if you like, that I started seeing a wider picture again. So it's got more and more intense. I've ended up where I am at the moment, which is unraveling how the old earth was created by looking at it from a frequency point of view, and then using all the stuff that I've learned in the healing, the alternative healing, and what happens to our physical bodies, our emotional landscapes, and then how we create our outer waking reality and sort of put it all together. Because at any one point, you're only ever going to have part of a picture, which of course skews the view of what's going on. And the more that you can challenge everything that you've ever been taught, and the more that you can take it down to a very simple level, because your brain will want to make it complicated, because we're taught the world is complicated. It may have a complicated manifestation of a frequency, but the baseline is that everything is manifest from a frequency. So the way that I work is that I would go in and take a frequency out, because if you take a frequency out, you can't have a manifestation. And the way that the world is collapsing at this moment in time is the dissolving of frequency bandwidths. So as we're moving frequency bandwidths, we're changing and interacting at different levels in our everyday human life experience. It's a bit like tuning into a radio show.
And let me ask this question, because some of our audience may not be familiar with frequency and vibration. So when you refer to frequency and vibration, what exactly do you mean?
Well, frequency and vibration, everything is energy. Everything in the universe is an energy. So you can quantify it, if you like. So if you're listening to a radio station, for you to listen to the program that's on the radio station, you need to know what to tune your radio to. So that's the frequency of the bandwidth that you're listening to. You're broadcasting on a certain bandwidth, and every person who's tuning in is able to pick up that station. So if we apply that to our entire human life experience, we are the antenna that's walking about. So the human body itself is like an antenna or a transmitter. So we can only experience what we're tuning into. So our human body decodes frequencies, because everything, all the energy that exists around us in the entire universe is a frequency. So depending what frequency you can tune into, depends what you can manifest in your outer waking reality. It's the exact opposite of the way that we're taught in everyday life.
Right.
We're taught to focus on the manifestation of something and not looking at what it is. You know, if you look at a table or a chair, they're not solid. Science can show you they're not solid. They're atoms that make up what looks and feels almost like a solid object, but it's a frequency.
Okay, so what about vibrational medicine? You mentioned that. So how does vibrational medicine work?
Vibrational medicine looks at the human body and looks at it from a frequency point of view. So, as everything is a frequency, frequencies that resonate, that are close together, will tend to amplify themselves. And frequencies that are far apart will repel. If you have disease in the human body, disease patterns follow a certain frequency, and we store certain emotions in different parts of our body. So, for example, you will store fear in your liver. So when you're looking at vibrational medicine and you find something wrong with the liver, then you would change the frequency of the liver to break up the dense frequency that's amassed itself in the liver. And as you do that, you're healing the person.
How would you do that?
You would do that through sound. You can do it through sound, you can do it through colour, you can do it through tuning forks, you can do it through toning, because everything is a frequency. So like if I had somebody who came to me for a healing session and they needed a colour, you know, there's millions of different colours of yellow, there's millions of different colours of blue. So you would be placing that either underneath the person or on the person, because everything affects everything else in our reality. So because our human eyes don't tend to, well, we can't see energy, we can't see radio waves, they're invisible to our naked human eyes, but everything interacts with everything else. So you can change a person's frequency by the colour or the sound that you're using and moving through their body.
Do they focus on a color? Karen, how does that work when you say they change the color? How do you change the color? I think maybe I missed that.
If you lay down on your bed and your bed sheets are blue, then as you sleep at night, you are absorbing the frequency of the colour blue. We don't choose the colour of clothes that we wear or the furnishings from our home based on complete randomness. We choose the colours that complement the frequency that we are. You may have a favourite colour, and you may have a colour that you really are not too bothered about. And the reason that you're not too bothered about one colour is that that's at the very edge of your frequency bandwidth. So you'll either feel, yuck, I don't like the colour, or you'll have no thoughts about the colour at all. Whereas if you have a favourite colour, that colour fully resonates with the frequency that you are.
Okay, let's just say as an example, somebody is suffering from rheumatoid arthritis. So if they came to you, how would you go about helping them to get some relief?
Rheumatoid arthritis, or anything to do with your joints, is the inability to be flexible in your daily life. So one of the colours that you would use if you're using colour is blue, because blue is a very cooling colour. You know, it can be that simple.
Okay.
Hospitals are normally painted in a lighter colour of blue for a reason. It's to help the healing of the patient. You know, the colours they choose for hospitals, the colours that they choose for your supermarkets. When I was in college, I studied marketing. Now, marketing and the psychology of marketing takes in things like the psychology of colour, where you have a bakery department, you use oranges, you know, warm colours, and then you work with the smell of the bread, which encourages the customer to buy the bread. And it's this homely feel that you're trying to make. Whereas if you're having a butcher department, you're going to use whites, you're going to use colours that give the impression of cleanliness. It's all psychology, but it's all frequency as well. You know, the fact that you've got the colours on the packaging of the foodstuffs that we eat, there's a lot of research and money goes into what colour to make your chocolate bar, you know, the wrapper, because psychologically you're getting more information about the colour and what it can do from you from the colour.
Yeah, it is all psychology, and I've done a couple of shows where I explained how colors are used in the media. So I completely understand what you're saying. This is very, very interesting because I do know somebody who has rheumatoid arthritis, and they are working on trying to bring themselves some relief. And so I'm going to recommend that they focus on the color blue.
If they wear the color blue, if they lie on the color blue, because blue is a very it takes down the inflammation, because it's inflammation of the joints, which is them not being flexible as well. So I would sort of advise them to look at their own lifestyle. How adaptable are they being to their surroundings?
Okay.
You know, are they quite easygoing, or are they holding on to patterns of behaviour that perhaps they need to let go of? That will sort of clog up the human body. You know, we become stiff. We're not flexible and adaptable anymore. And that's an emotional landscape as well.
Alrighty, well, this is very, very interesting, and I know a lot of the listeners are going to find this very intriguing as well. Let me ask you something else, because you had mentioned, and I know we'll get into more detail on this, but just so that the audience gets a bit of a reference point, if you will, you mentioned old Earth. So when you refer to old Earth, what does that mean?
I think your listeners would probably reference it as being the matrix that's collapsing at the moment. The old Earth is the way that the world has worked up until probably about 2012, when it started becoming a bit more unstable. And at the moment it's going through a complete dissolving. So we're getting all the stuff that's coming up. We're getting all the corruption in the banking. We're getting all the corruption in human society. We're getting how the world does not work for us anymore. And as the old world collapses, then we move into an evolution of species. So we move into an evolved way of interacting with each other. But the systems have to crash because they never worked for us anyway. We were given the illusion that they do, but they don't. They don't support human life in truth at all, and moving into a new way of being and living.
How would you respond to somebody that says, well, it's collapsing. The collapse is an illusion also, because the people or the entities that are in control are manipulating this collapse, and they are bringing about. It's not that they are collapsing. They are engineering and orchestrating the collapse. How do you respond to that?
Yes and no, that they're engineering the collapse. To answer your question, I would have to reference the Book of Revelation, and it's all written in the Book of Revelation, which talks about the end of times and the collapse of our society. It's all there. And the Book of Revelations is, many people read it in a linear fashion, and a very, this has got to happen and that's got to happen. We're taught linear time. Linear time is not a natural thing. We have time and space, but time and space is not linear. If we're moving into being evolved and understanding how the universe works, then we have to let go of the concepts that we were taught that keep us within the sort of control matrix, if you like. We were given a set of rules. Now, the human race have always lived within these rules, but what if the rules are not real?
Right.
Challenge everything. It's like we never challenge it because we're kept busy in our everyday lives. We're like hamsters on a wheel most of the time, and we tend to fall to the assumption that because a certain percentage of the human race believes something, it makes it true. It doesn't. It just means that a certain percentage of the human race believes something. And again, that's frequency. So we're challenging everything, and there's stuff beyond the old Earth. I mean, we've lived in a construct that's broken the natural laws of the universe. We're now evolving out of it.
Well, me personally, I am seeing a shift. I tell people that we're going to go through more pain, more challenges as we make this shift, but it's clear to me, at least, that many people are awakening to the truth and moving away from deception, and they are peeling the curtain back and looking behind the curtain to see the great Oz. What you're saying resonates with me, is what I'm saying. I do see this change coming. So the next question, I guess, would be, somebody might ask, okay, so what does the new Earth look like?
Well, that's always a challenge, because we've been taught in the old Earth that we must see where we're walking before we walk into it. A lot of people are on the cusp of walking into a new reality and a new way of being, but they're trying to use the tools they were given in the old Earth, the rules that don't work. So it's about experience. As you heal your internal emotional landscape, then you will see a new way of being able to live and interact with those around you. Because our emotions dictate the picture that we see at any one time. You know, if you look out onto your life and you're angry, you will get one picture. If you look out onto the same event and you're happy, the picture changes. Then if you look out onto the same life event and you're sad, the picture will change again. So the pain and the trauma of the old Earth is the manipulation of the matrix. They manipulate your emotions. It's like marketing. They're not selling you an item of clothing because you need the item of clothing. The item of clothing is sold to you for the emotional effect that it will have on you. You know, it's like, it's anything. It's from clothes to washing up liquid to cars. It's the emotional manipulation of the product to get you to buy the product.
Right.
It's not what it will do for you physically, it's how emotionally it will change your life.
Yeah, they want to keep you in the box. They want to keep you on what you referred to before as the hamster wheel. They want to keep you there. So everything that they're doing, and your marketing analogy is great, everything that they're marketing you, good and bad, and a lot of it is bad, is to keep you in that box, to keep you where you're at so that you don't spread your wings.
Exactly. It's like when you're putting on the TV, and it's like, a lot of people have said, oh, well, I don't watch TV. Well, it'll come at you whatever way it can. So it's going to be billboards on the highway. It's going to be illustrations in a magazine. It'll be a neighbour telling you something.
Right.
It's emotional manipulation. We're all meant to live on 2.4 children in perfect families with, you know, a certain income, a certain house. And if we don't, somehow we've failed at life. But nobody lives that life. That's the life the marketing people dangle in front of us and say, you can get this if you follow this set of rules. And then the next one comes along and says, oh, hold on, I can get you there quicker. And people are so confused and so emotionally shut down because of the confusion in the old Earth that, you know, they're running back and forward. If you want to step out of the matrix, you have to heal your internal emotional landscape, because everything is manipulated through the emotional residue that you have. So they will trigger anger, they will trigger fear, they will trigger sadness, and they will trigger grief, because they're the most powerful human emotions that you can manipulate people through. You know, a picture says 1,000 words. They will use horrific pictures. They will use children, animals, war, whatever, because as soon as the person is emotionally triggered, it doesn't matter what the words say, it doesn't matter if the story's real. The emotional manipulation has taken place and you're back in the matrix again.
How do you recommend or suggest that people they change their emotional landscape? They change their way of existing. In other words, raising their frequency and vibration. So if somebody came to you and said, you know, Karen, I understand everything you're saying, but I don't know where to start. So how would you get them going? How would you get the ball rolling for them?
The first thing that I would do is I would connect them, and this is not about religion. I want to state that really clearly. If you've been on my website, you will see that you know, my website is Truth Codes Ministries. Now, one of the biggest lies, because there's no other word you can use for it, is religion. Religion is used to emotionally manipulate the entire human race. So you have the man who interprets God's word, but God's word is changed. We have so many different revisions of the Bible, it's incredible. I read somewhere the other day there are 14,800 differences between an original version of the Bible and some of the versions that are in operation today. If you change a word in a sentence, you change the meaning of the entire sentence. So in the work that I do, I'm connecting people to Christ. Now, I'm not connecting people to Christ in a religious setting. Christ is a frequency. Now, he's the only person who's walked the earth fully connected to God. Now, that's the creator. So you have him almost like, I always say to people, look at him like a transformer plug. You know, if you went across the UK and you tried to plug in your laptop, you would need an adapter plug because the voltage is different between the two countries. So the voltage between us and the human race and where we came from, which is source, is so different that we need that adapter plug because we can't plug directly into source. We've been contained in this matrix for too long to do that. Our vibration is too low. So I would connect people to Christ first of all. I also work in symbols. The human brain is amazing at looking for puzzles. And the human brain will try and make something very complicated and convince you to hold on to stuff you don't need anymore. So I work in a way where I work with people's emotions, but I turn the emotions into symbols. That way, your human brain can't work out what frequency you're letting go of. So it just lets it go. Because emotions are the manifestation of a frequency. Once you release a frequency, you can't manifest the emotions.
You said you change it into a symbol. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, working with people, I work with people one-to-one, or I can work with people like remotely, like I do a lot of work via email. So I'm connecting them into a landscape where I'm connecting into whatever pattern is trapping them at the moment. We've all got patterns of behaviour that we can almost understand, but we don't quite understand what drives us. So we tend to almost self-sabotage ourselves. That self-sabotaging sits at an unconscious level. So you can have somebody who states, I want to change my life and I want to do X. But unconsciously, if there's a frequency there that is connected to a different reality or a different point of view, then the unconscious is going to sabotage the person at a conscious level. So you've always got to work at, that's why I work at a symbol level. You work at the unconscious plane because we are taught how to live and how to be who we are in the first 7 years of our life. The first 2 years of our life are foundational patterning. So a lot of people think that because a child can't speak, that child is sort of completely oblivious to what's going on in the home. Children who have not yet formed human language use human body language, and body language will never lie. So if I'm interacting with somebody on a physical level, I'm not so much noting what the words that they're using to me, I'm watching their body language. Now, in the first 2 years of life, we learn about security and safety, both physically and emotionally. So how our parents responded to us when we're angry is set down in the first year of life. How our parents supported us or did not support us when we go through our emotional range when we're younger is set down in those early years. You've got the terrible twos between the ages of 2 and 4, depending how your parents responded, sets your pattern for dealing with emotion and conflict later on in your life. And it's reinforced every 7 years. That's the old human chakra system. So when you're between the ages of 0 and 1, and not many people can remember being between the ages of 0 and 1, if something happened to you that was quite traumatic, say you maybe fell down the stairs or something, you have anchored that as a security and safety issue. So when you grow up and you get to 8 years old, you might develop an irrational fear of heights. Now, it could be irrational because you're thinking, where on earth has this come from? You're not remembering consciously or subconsciously what happened to you between the ages of 0 and 1.
Right.
And this goes a pattern throughout your entire life, but it's also generational. It's passed down in the cellular structure of our human bodies. We're a product of our parents, we're a product of their parents, and so on. That's how you get disease patterns that runs in families. Because the child is half father, half mother. The genetic patterning of the parents have an input into the patterning of the child's life.
So how do you resolve that fear of heights conflict as an example? Because that's a very good example. How would you do that? Because it is at the subconscious level.
Working with symbols again, because you probably find that it's connected to different dimensional timelines and different lifetimes. We come in here and live one life, but we live more than one life all in the now. People call it past life regression, but it's not really past life. Everything happens in the now moment.
Yep.
So you would probably find that that's a theme that runs through all the lives that you've come in to live. So you would work on a symbol level and release the frequency, which then would change the outer landscape in their life.
I'm sorry for being very, very thick here, but when you say you're going to change it to a symbol level, what is the process of changing it to a symbol?
It's really simple. If I asked you about an emotion, right, I ask you about anger, turn the word anger into the first symbol that comes into your head.
I see.
And then hand it to Christ.
Okay.
Because I would have connected you to Christ first, and connecting to Christ is as simple as visualizing him standing in front of you and just placing your hands in his hands. That's all you have to do to make that connection. And that allows you then to move your emotional landscape, and you're handing it over. You know, the whole thing about Christ being on the cross and the fact that he died for all the sins of the world, we're taught to keep hold of all that emotional baggage. The human body was never designed to store emotion. And once we start storing things in our body, we overload our organs.
Yep.
And once we start overloading our organs, we affect the entire energy system, throw ourselves out of balance, and then we try and medicate the body. Now, general medicine will only treat the part of the body that appears to be not working, without looking at the overall balance of the entire energy of the body, which throws it out again. The human body is designed to come into balance naturally. When science starts coming in there and putting this here and that there, we lose that natural balance.
That's really very interesting, Karen. So essentially, when you create this symbol, or the client creates a symbol, it almost sounds like what's happening is that this emotion, this elusive feeling that they have, you're creating a way in which they can make it tangible. In other words, they can kind of package it so that it's no longer elusive.
Yes, and then what normally happens, it's almost like working back to front. You give the symbol and you hand it over. And then what normally happens within a 24 to 48 hour period, loosely, is that certain memories will start coming back into the client's head of when they first experienced this emotion, and the actual person it's tied to. So we tend to pattern our behaviour from either our mother or our father. Now, whether our mother or father is there, absent, or we never knew them is irrelevant, because the teachings are handed down in families, family patterning. Our view of the world is patterned into us through the eyes of our mother and father, or our caregivers in the early years. So what normally happens is when you're turning something into a symbol and you hand it over, the body starts releasing it. So you may have flashbacks of, oh, I forgot that incident, or, oh, right, now I can see how that works. And you begin to get a perspective that you couldn't while you were emotionally challenged by the situation. You become an observer to your own life, if you like. So then you can see the patterns of behaviour that you're blind to when you're running the emotion. If you're running an emotion of anger, you cannot have you won't get a neutral picture. You know, it'll be a skewed picture, and you won't be able to step back far enough to see what's actually playing out, because the anger will just take you and pull you.
Very interesting. Now, you're doing this work now, so if somebody wanted to reach out to you and connect with you after hearing this show, how do they go about doing that?
Well, the first thing is to visit the Truth Codes Ministries website, which is just truthcodesministries, all one word.com. They can also find information on the main blog. I blog maybe once, twice a day, just trying to put it in very everyday human language, what's shifting in the world and how at an emotional an everyday waking level we may be experiencing the world. And I'm just doing it for my own experience. As I'm experiencing the changes and I've taken my own personal walk, which has seen a lot of internal healing, as I've taken that, I've shared it with the world, because I'm not unique in what I've gone through. You know, I lost my parents young. I lost my father at 13, lost my mother when I was 36. Now, the two deaths are completely different, but how we react to a death depends on the way the person died as well. You know, my father died in a car accident, which was sudden. The reaction and the emotional reaction to a sudden death is different to somebody who's perhaps fallen ill, and we have that adjustment period where we're told they won't get any better. You know, there is a different impact on it. And the age that we experience death also, you know, keys into this emotional landscape that we have. You know, it depends, because we do this 7 years. So the first year we're doing our security, we go through the chakras basically. 0 to 1, we go through our base chakra, which is security. 1 to 2, we're going through our sacral, which is our emotional landscape. Then we go through the I am, which is our solar plexus, which is all about who we are. Then we process our heart, then we process our throat, then we process our brow, and then we process our crown. Now, if you were to lose somebody at 4 years old, you're processing your heart chakra. Now, if somebody dies when you're 4 years old, or 11, or 18, or 25, you know, they're every 7 years, then that's a major impact on that organ and what you're processing in life. So that's the other thing that's very hidden in our energy systems that we tend to filter out and play a huge part in how we can heal and how we actually hold on to that emotional residue.
So Karen, if you're 1 and then 8 and 15 and 22, 7 years apart, 1 being the root chakra. So are you saying that if somebody experiences trauma, let's say when they're 8, then that trauma is going to manifest or affect the root chakra?
Yes, it is. And every time that the energy goes through, which is every 7 years, it's going to trigger that emotional trauma again until it's healed. It builds on it. Safety and security. When my mother died, I'd been processing my base chakra. So, you know, that's your whole world caving in. There's the added stuff that goes on with each chakra.
Right, because that's all of your security, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, very, very interesting. I know that a lot of people are going to find this very interesting. Let me ask this then, because I know you want to get to the a lot more information, the channeling. And I was wondering if you could spend a little bit more time taking us through that process, how you developed the channeling, how you knew that you were channeling and that these weren't your own thoughts or something that was coming from your own mind. How did it come about, and how did you validate it?
It came about, first of all, the book that you mentioned previously. I wrote a book a few years ago, from the beings from Orion. Now, they first appeared to me when I was in a meditation, when I was training in my crystal course. I was in a meditation and a group of beings just appeared to me. Now, they had to appear to me about 4 or 5 times because they stood in front of me and they didn't speak to me. So, of course, everybody comes round from their meditation and we're sharing what we experienced. And I'm sitting there like, okay, I have a group of blue people who keep appearing to me. They're not saying anything. So the rest of the room is like, okay, who do you think they are? And I'm like, I don't know. They're not telling you who they are. So then, after like 3 or 4 different meditations where this blue beings just came and they stood in front of me, it was actually my tutor who said, why don't you ask them? You know, sometimes we're the obvious, we just filter out. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to ask them who they are. So the next time I was meditating and the blue being appeared again, and they always appeared to me in stone circles. And me being Scottish, I've always lived in parts of Scotland where I've been near stone circles. So they're energy points for any of your listeners who are really interested in stone circles. The oldest ones in Scotland I know there's a lot about Stonehenge and everything else. If you reverse it and go to the north of Scotland, they predate by thousands and thousands of years.
Okay.
So I've always lived near stone circles. And the beings told me they were from Orion. And I'm like, okay. So I sat with that for a little while, and I was actually getting a healing from another girl who was on my course, where she was healing me using crystal skulls and crystals. And I had an experience that I would never like to repeat, and I probably gave her the fright of her life. If you're lying on a therapy bed and people have placed crystals on you, the last thing that you want is your client jumping off the bed and the crystals scattering. And that's exactly what I did. I went in to a timeline or a vision where I could see a civilization fall apart, and all the people were blue, a bit like the Avatar people.
I was just going to say, like the Avatar people, yeah.
Very much like the Avatar people, not quite as tall as the Avatar people. And they showed me a village, and one being going a little bit berserk, and just the whole village scattering. But it was very upsetting to me, and I couldn't understand my emotional reaction to it until I did a bit more meditation. Then I started, in my outer waking life, having all the information coming to me about Orion. So people would email me things about Orion and wars and the planetary systems of Orion. And then I started tying it in with the whole Egyptian and Syrian thing and the pyramids of Giza, and all of it started making a lot of sense. And then they had said to me they wanted to speak through me, because you can feel the essence of what you're channeling. And I would say to people who are playing with channeling or experiencing to be very careful. Always ask who it is that's coming through, because they need your permission to come in, unless you've just got like an open door, and nobody would leave their front door open and invite anybody in that was passing. There are energies that are high dimensional, and there are energies that will tell you they are, but they're not. And you feel it by their vibration. So they came in, and then I started putting out the channelings from the Council of Orion, the High Council of Orion, and then I wrote the book. And then I've had various other star systems and energies come to me and give me information that then I find in the outer waking world. I'm never shown. I don't search for information.
Now, Karen, what did the Council from Orion say exactly? Can you summarize, generally speaking, or the gist of what their message was to you?
The message has always been about uniting the world. The information I was always given from, I've taught with beings from Orion, from Sirius, and from the Pleiades, and they're the main ones that people who would reference themselves as starseeds would go for. So people normally identify with being from the Pleiades or from Orion or from Sirius. And it has to be remembered that every civilization started somewhere. Just like the human race have been kept very low in frequency, so have these three main civilizations. So Sirius is connected to the Egyptian timelines, where you have the Great Pyramid of Giza, and you have a very feline symbology that runs through it. Anything to do with cats and the feline is a Sirius connection.
Okay.
Which takes you to the pyramids of Giza, and then you've got the Orion's belt that lines up with the pyramids of Giza. And the Pleiades is mainly about our emotional landscape. So the symbols for the Pleiades would be dolphins and the cetaceans and all the beings in the sea. Sirius, Orion, and the Pleiades are three frequencies that were distorted and used to control the human race. So Orion's frequency and their civilization is based in logic. But logic, when tied to an open heart, is not logic when tied to just logic. So the beings from Orion gave us sacred geometry, and they gave us logic and reason. But it's distorted in that within the matrix, our human logical mind is taught to look for puzzles. I mean, people can get trapped in their head. 90% of what's in your head you never physically experience. But if you allow your head to take you down all the roads it wants to take you down, you can be in some nightmare scenarios. But most of the time you will not ever experience them. You know, it's just your mind running overtime. People do get caught in logic, and I have to the human male is bound to logic more than the human female. Males tend to be trained to look at the world from a logical point of view. And I've worked with a lot of males who are in that particular trap. And the main question they ask me is, but why? Because they're looking for a logical reason as to why something happens. Things in the universe just are. We've been taught to apply logic and reason, and by applying logic and reason, we define, therefore we contain the experience. How much we can let go of logic and reason sometimes then shows up in how expansive we can allow ourselves to be. You know, we're keeping ourselves in the box. There does not have to be a logical reason for things to happen. Sometimes the understanding of it comes after. You know, logic is not understanding. We can have an understanding of a concept through experience that logic will prevent you from experiencing.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So we have Orion with logic. Sirius is the trauma and pain frequency that's human families. If you look at any of the Egyptian history and the way that it's distorted, I think there's only 2 pharaohs, a king and queen, who ruled together. The rest of them were either or. So you get your cults of Isis, you get your female cults and your male cults, where it's either male or female, pitting one against the other. So Egyptian history, in truth, not the distorted version that Egypt likes to put out because they've got a religious text that they have to keep in line with. The pyramids can't be that old because they've got a religious text that says otherwise. You know, there's a lot of that stuff going on. And the Pleiades, the distortion they put in there is us being responsible for the emotional landscapes of everybody. In truth, we can only ever be responsible for our own emotions. We're the only ones that are feeling them. And yet, people who are running a very distorted Pleiadian frequency are normally referenced as being empathic. Empathic does not mean that you have to take on the entire world and process their emotions. That's not what you were built for. And a lot of people get caught in that. When they accept, oh, I'm an empath, that means I'm sensitive and I can't interact with the world.
Okay.
You know, it means you're running a distorted Pleiadian frequency and you need to release it and you can build your strength. We're not here to process other people's emotions.
Very interesting. So now this higher council came to you, and did they give you any perspective or insight as to where Earth is headed, where humanity is headed?
Humanity will move through and into the new Earth. This is the only dimensional timeline in which that happens. We may only have 2,000 years to reference, between history and the Bible and everything else. But we've done this millions of times. We live in a dimensional contained space, and we've been taught that we live on a planet in the middle of the universe. So, you know, everything is an illusion.
You're making me smile right now.
Do you know, it's like, I had emails from people a couple of years ago, and they used to send me these emails, people that I work with quite a bit, and they're like, I just need to run this past you, Karen. The universe doesn't look like we're told, does it? And I'm like, no, it doesn't. But we didn't have the human words to sort of like explain what it does look like.
Yeah.
Because anytime I've done meditation and I've talked with beings, that's not the universe I'm shown. I mean, NASA's got some lovely pictures. They're lovely, but they're pictures.
Yeah.
It's like, come on. And we can't breathe in space. That means that we'll never try and attempt to go to space because, oh, look, we can't breathe. It's like, seriously? You know.
I'm going to send you a documentary. It's called The Vedicosmose. It's a very, very fascinating documentary. And essentially it says that everything we've been taught about space is completely wrong. Completely wrong. It breaks it all down. It's a great 1-hour documentary. I found it extremely fascinating. So I'm going to, after this show, I'm going to forward it to you.
Excellent. The beings have said to me as well, they told me this a few years ago, they had said to me, no human being has ever left the planet Earth.
Yeah.
Do you not think it's just really neat how all these planets are like spaced all in a line? It's like somebody thought, oh, but that's pleasing to the eye. It's just a little bit too nice. It's like, nice is the wrong word, but it's too I don't know. I don't have words for it. It's when you look at it, you're like, really?
Well, it's very interesting because all of this flat Earth stuff has come out now, and I know that you and I have shared some links and stuff like that on the flat Earth, and I just found it extremely interesting. And to be honest with you, it makes a whole lot more sense than the whole ball Earth. You live on a globe. We go around the sun. I mean, I don't want to make the show about this, but it's just interesting that you brought that up about these different dimensions and these planes. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is exactly what's kind of rolling out now, I think.
Well, the other thing that I've been working with, and I haven't said publicly, but hey, let's say it now, is if you take a piece of paper and you fold the paper in half and you keep folding it, then you get different dimensional spaces. Now, coming from Scotland and being in the USA, I'm absolutely astounded by how much of the American landscape could be Scotland. Your trees, the hills, everything about it, apart from obviously your weather, because obviously we're an experiment all by ourselves. Apart from the weather, the landscape is the same. Now, if you were to fold a piece of paper right in the middle of the Atlantic, and I'm struggling with it, there ever being even oceans, that's the latest one, I'm working on that just now, that if we can only see water to the horizon, then we assume that beyond the horizon is more water. I'm not convinced. So if you have the folding of the different dimensional spaces, you would have the UK, then you would have Europe, and you'd have the Americas. Now, when you look at the cultural and the landscape and the geology and everything else, it's like the UK is an experiment in weather, because anybody in the UK talks about weather. It's the main thing that UK people talk about, because we can have 4 seasons in one day. When you look at the USA, the experiment is to do with food, because the food over here is not like the food back in the UK. I can state that quite categorically. It's completely different. It may even be labelled the same, but it's not.
Is it better or worse?
Nothing tastes the same. I mean, the soda that you have over here has got high fructose corn syrup in it that you do not get in the UK. They use sugar or they use aspartame, which is just evil, but it's a different taste. There are other things as well where you have strange things added that make no sense. Why would you have certain ingredients? Okay. And the non-labelling, in the UK we have our foods labelled, whether they're organic, GMO and all the rest of it. So buying groceries in this country can be challenging. I do it by energy. If I can't physically pick something up off the shelf, I'm not meant to buy it.
Okay, so there is labelling in Europe?
There is labelling, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, the other thing about the labelling, and I don't know why they're bringing this up, but let's bring it up as well, is that there's a friend of mine who you may have seen some of the information in the news that her grandchild was crushed by an IKEA set. I think it was a chest of drawers that fell over. Now, IKEA in Europe and the UK, when you buy an item of furniture from IKEA, you get these little strand things where you attach the furniture to the wall. Now, they come as standard. Yep. If I was to walk to an IKEA in the UK, then I would have these sort of binding things that you put to the wall, because I had it when my son was little. In the USA, they're not regulatory, and even though the IKEA have now admitted that would have saved the child's life, they're still putting the onus on the people who are buying it, saying that you can have the straps as long as you ask for them. They're not actually in the furniture pack. So why would a multinational company have Europe and the UK with one rule and the USA a completely different rule? You would have thought it would be widespread across the company, and it's not. Yeah. So things like that, where you're used to multinationals, they act differently in different countries. And I'm only saying that because I'm a Scot in the USA, and I can see the differences. And there's the whole propaganda thing as well that goes on between the UK, Europe, and the USA, which I'm sure you're aware of. Yeah. Where I talk to people back home about what's happening in the USA, which is complete news to them because they're running the stuff that they're getting told in the media. And the stuff that you get told about the UK and this country, I know is not correct because I'm talking to people who are living in that country.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, come on, people.
Yeah, I'm aware of that because a lot of my guests, of course, from all over the world, and so we've had this discussion before, and we can share notes. And you're exactly right.
So this whole, you can fool some of the people some of the time thing, as this begins to raise in people's consciousness, because we're moving our vibration and we're moving, as we begin uniting and talking to one another as a person to a person to a person, they're going to find it more and more difficult to keep the game going. Because while you've pitted country against country, you're making the assumption that the people in the countries are never going to get together and talk to one another as people. And I think that is the main thing that's going to bring down the old earth. When people realise that the person standing in the street next to them is another human being. You know, they're not American or European or Australian or male or female. They're another living human being.
Right.
And that's where we have to take it down to, because the matrix has worked to divide us. We divide ourselves into ages, or occupations, or height, or weight, or how much we earn. And all of it separates us. We're all human beings.
There's a comment that Max Egan made one time on a show, and I think Max and I spoke about this a little bit the first time he was on the show about over a year and a half ago. And I remember listening to one of his shows. He said, ask somebody, who are they? Who are you? And many people will respond with their occupation. They will say, I'm a doctor. I'm a dentist. And the question was not, what do you do? The question was, who are you?
And that, I think, that is what triggers most people in the fall of this big matrix that's coming down. Because we've been taught to fill our solar plexus with who we are, like labels. I'm a mother, or I'm a wife, or I'm a dentist, or whatever. Then we bury who we are underneath it all. So as the world comes tumbling down, or the old world comes tumbling down, and that displaces the labels, people start feeling very uncomfortable because they feel lost, because they've lost connection with who they are as a person.
Right.
And they've identified more fully with the labels. So we have to let go of the labels and remember that, yes, we may be somebody's wife, we may be somebody's mother, and we may be a dentist, but underneath that is the person that we were born. And at some level during our life experience, we parked that person and we don't know who they are. So it's getting in touch with who you are as a person, as a human being, and how you then relate the human being to the human being. It's not the dentist to another dentist or the doctor. It's a human being to another human being. And
exactly.
That is what's strengthening as the labels are coming down.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think I may have derailed you with some of my questions. So what I would like to do is to move back to the channeling a little bit, because probably the audience is listening and saying, Mike, you took her off the road here, you know? Let's go back to the channeling. Could you talk a little bit more about that, going back to the messages that you were given and how you connect with them, perhaps? And most importantly, Karen, because I know this is there's a lot of skepticism with channeling, because the first question that comes up is, well, how do you know you're not talking to yourself? So could you take the audience through that a little bit, how you validate within yourself that what you're getting is a true message outside of yourself?
Well, my channeling's changed over the years. I tend to, anybody who's on my website and who reads the blogs will find that the energy that's coming through me to channel is the energy that's referenced the human race as God, which may seem a bit triggering for some people, but it's taken me a long time to get to that level of frequency where there's no other word for it. I suppose you could call it creator, but it's through a connection to Christ. And that's why I'm referencing the Book of Revelations, because everything is written for us. I'm sure that the people who wrote the Book of Revelations 2,000 years ago were like, okay. And of course, some people put it back to referencing it 2,000 years ago. It's alive today. You know, everything that's happened in the world and the major world events are documented through code in the Book of Revelations. And the Bible is coded. You certainly don't have time in your program now, and you could spend hours talking about the coding that's in the Bible.
Yeah.
where the numbers appear repeatedly. So, and to compare it to the Matrix as well, for those who have watched the Matrix films, which must be very few people now who've not seen them, the moment when Neo stands up after he's got the bullets and he sees the agents, but he sees the coding as well as he sees the agents, is the bit that we're moving towards. Everything is a frequency, and when you see the way that the old Earth is constructed, the emotional manipulation and where things are hidden. Now, I've said to people for a very long time, there is nothing that is hidden from us. It doesn't mean we can see it. What they've done is hide it at a frequency. Remember, if you go back to my thing about decoding of a broadcast signal, if you are creating a broadcast that is out with the bandwidth of the radio station, those tuning into the radio station won't see the programming that sits further up the dial. So as we raise our vibration and we expand our energy, we're able to reach things that have always been there, but we've not been able to see because we've not been able to decode them because they're frequencies. So with the channeled information, the information I get, my personal guidance that's guided me and has seen me go from one country to another, has seen me change the way that I work from one way and expand it into other things, is never given in a linear time frame, because we're the only ones that exist in linear time. I don't know if you've watched the movie Interstellar.
I did.
The bit where he's in the library and he's searching for the point for his daughter. Now, the point that he uses is love, because he remembers the pocket watch that he gave her. So he could pinpoint it, but the beings that had created the three-dimensional space that was inside a five-dimensional space couldn't pinpoint it because they didn't have linear time. He was remembering a moment of love between him and his daughter. So the whole dimensional space thing is that when you're conversing with beings that exist out with the human race, you have to take into consideration that they do not work in linear. Any being that tries to give you information that can pinpoint dates, times, months, or years is lying. Or they're trapped in the Matrix. There are dimensional beings that are fourth and fifth dimensional. The fourth plane being where psychics work most of the time. And the fifth being just out with the psychic range. There are beings that will try and pretend they're other beings, but they will give themselves away by giving you dates, places, and times. The human race are evolving out of linear. We can't move multidimensionally if we're stuck in linear. We're following a rope. You know, it's going from one side of the page to the other. In a multidimensional landscape, you can access any part of that page at any time. If you follow linear, you can only ever go from left to right. So if you're following left to right, you're not going to go to the top left-hand corner of the page, and you're not going to go to the bottom left-hand corner. You're only going to go from left to right, and that's how we narrow and contain our human life experience. So the way that I'm validating the information is coming through is that I'm given information, I share that information when I'm asked to with the human race, and then world events unfold in the way that I've been shown.
Okay, so now how do you reconcile what you've been shown and the statement that you're not being shown dates?
Because if you tie it into a date, you define it. You can feel the energy shift, and of course everything changes in the now moment, which again is where linear falls down. If I say to you, you're going to drink a cup of tea next Thursday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that next Thursday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon has not happened yet. Anything could happen between now and that moment that comes round that we call Thursday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You could go off tea, or tea could be wiped off the face of the planet. You don't know what's going to happen moment to moment. So as we're breaking down the old Earth, we have to be aware that we are shifting timelines. We're collapsing timelines, and we're shifting to truth. Now, the old Earth is built on layers and layers of half-truths, untruths, and complete lies. So it's like getting a big box of Lego and creating the entire society that we live in. We're knocking down the bits of Lego that are lies, untruths and mistruths, and all that's left is truth. So at any one time, when the bit of Lego on the left-hand side collapses, we get a picture. But the bit of Lego on the right-hand side is going to come down shortly as well. That changes it. The picture will change and shift and change and shift and change and shift until we're just got a baseline of truth. Sometimes I'm given the picture because it remains static for a little while.
Yeah.
As if we did all this in the one go, we would all go insane. We're taking our brains with us. I know there's a lot of people who are trying to do this as quick as they possibly can, and it will work against them. We're moving into an evolution. It's not ascension. We ascend into evolution. This is the human race evolving the way that we should have been had we not been contained. So we've got a lot of evolution. You know, this will be it for, I don't know, billions of years maybe. Don't know, we've not lived it yet.
Yeah. No, this is very, very interesting. Talk about the containment a little bit, Karen. I know you touched on it a little bit before, but can you go into a little more detail about that? When you talk about the human race is contained, what does that mean?
We're contained by the rules that we've been taught and that we adhere to. You will find patterning within families, within cultures, and within society. And it's a bit like an electric fence. So I don't like using the analogy of sheep in a field, but it's the easiest one to use. I think it's very derogatory when people start accusing people of being asleep. They're not understanding that if you're at a certain frequency, you just cannot see what other people can see. It's a process. That's what I mean about evolution. People are looking about and ticking boxes and saying, well, I'm more awake than that person further down the street. Well, you can see different things. Maybe they can see things that you can't. We're in this together. It's not a competition, and it's certainly not a race. But to use the analogy of being in a field. So we're in a field. We only ever have to go near the electric fence once, and we will never venture near that fence again. Now, the electric fences that we're taught is our emotional landscapes. You will not move out of a rule if you have emotional trauma attached to the rule. So one of the main rules within the old earth is that life is painful and love hurts. Now, just because, well, all of the human race have experienced hurt in relation to the emotion of love does not make the statement love hurts truth. It just means that we've had the experience because the construct is set up to give us that experience. You cannot logically work out truth. Truth is an experience. If you can physically validate something in your waking life by interacting with it, it's truth. If you can't, you'll be in a debate. I used to say, like a few months ago, I think, when I was on Pyramid 1, I used to say to Bob that we can all sit about talking about grass. So say there's 10 of us in a room and we're discussing the different types of grass, we're discussing how long the grass is, and we can go into a theological debate about grass for like forever. The only person who's physically validating the grass is the person standing barefoot on the patch of grass. Everybody else is talking about it. Now, we are brought into a world where we talk and we debate, but we don't experience. So it's like we're sitting at the cinema watching our own lives. We tend to look at our lives in reverse. We tend to go over memories. So we're always in the past tense of our lives. We're never in the actual moment. It's like drinking a cup of tea. The moment that tea is going down your throat, you are having the experience of that cup of tea. Up until that moment, you have not had the experience. You've had the presentation of it. You've had the thought about it. You've had the knowledge of it, but you've not had the experience. And moving from the old earth into the new earth is physical validation through experience of living. So when I see stuff on the TV or I see stuff in the media, unless I can physically interact with that, it's illusion. If God needs me to validate something physically, He will put that in my life so that I can physically interact with it and anchor that truth. And that's where the chaos is going in the world just now, because the media is using it to trigger people. So people are going off at the deep end with all the emotional residue and saying, oh, the world is in this state and the next state and the next state. Unless I'm physically standing next to an event that's happening, then I've parked it. Because if not, then I've pulled into the emotional manipulation and pulled out of experiencing the life that I'm here living right this moment. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And the question I was that I will ask, Karen, is, so with all the manipulation and the deception going on, that would lend itself to the thought that there are energies, entities, something that is sentient and understands how to manipulate the human mind and knows how to lure people into that state of deception and into that state of illusion where many people are at. So the question, I guess, that I have is, what's going on there? I mean, do you subscribe to that there are unseen forces which are negative and that there are unseen forces which are positive, and that as part of this landscape where we're at right now on Earth, that there is some kind of battle going on, or is it just part of an age that we have to pass through?
It's
I hope
both.
that made sense.
It did make sense. It's both.
Okay.
There is an unseen battle that's going on that the human race have been involved in since the beginning of our creation. Now, some people may trigger at the use of the words, but there's no other word to use for it. A lot of people will try and step out of demons and fallen angels because they're put under religious context and we don't live in the Middle Ages. Now, when I said to you before, if God needs me to know something, he will physically validate it for me. I have met evil. Mm-hmm. There's no other word for it. I have met it in various guises, coming through various people, and I have been in various situations that most people would not believe. And I know that other people have experienced the same thing. Because doing the work that I do, I needed to know exactly what it was. Now, I come from an upbringing where, yes, I used to go to church. We used to go to church every Sunday, went to Sunday school and everything else. I grew up the proportion of my life believing the devil was an invention of the church to get bums on seats, until I met him. Now, he's not the only one. There are various demonic energies, shall we say, that walk this earth. And the reason that they can do what they do is that most of the human race don't believe in them. Well, it doesn't matter if you don't believe in them. They're banking on it. They exist. They're real. They are controlling and manipulating the emotional landscape of the average human being every single day. And some of the atrocities that you're seeing in the news, the real ones, because there's real ones and there's ones that, well, you know yourself, there are ones that are not real. They may look human and the person may appear human. Humans can be possessed. Of course they can. Many people walk with fallen angels and interact with demonic energies that are telling them they're other than they are. Now, part of the thing that I've highlighted and sort of got shot down in flames for was part of the New Age movement, which is a religion. Part of the New Age religion deals with angels. Now, there's a good proportion of people who are interested in the New Age philosophies and everything else, who are of the belief that angels come from heaven. They all came from heaven. Lucifer came from heaven. He was one of God's brightest and most beautiful angels he ever created, until he fell. So a lot of what is put into mainstream society and is written off as, oh well, angels are all pink and fluffy and they're all on our side, they will act that way until you start trying to step out of what they're trying to tell you or push you into or persuade you to do. And then they get nasty. Now, people have been driven out of life by demonic influences. So this whole perched on your shoulder, whispering in your ear, yes, there are probably millions of people on the earth who will tell you they didn't know what came over them. They might have found themselves sitting on a ledge with this urge to just take that final step and jump, because that's what they want. and it's real. And they're going to get more and more obvious as this matrix is dissolving. It's not just some elite force that's in charge of the government. They will quite happily walk down the street holding your hand because you can't see them. And they will appear as other than they are to persuade you to follow the path that they're trying to take. And religion is full of it. You know, if you're looking for the devil, go into a church. Now that might anger quite a lot of people. Do not think for one moment that sitting in a church saves you unless you have accepted Christ and that you have put that cross in your heart. Up until that point, the devil will sit on the pew next to you because a lot of religion is based on fear. God's not about fear, God's about love. Man has interpreted it, and a lot of religion has got too much influence on our banking systems and our way of life. You know, it says in the Bible you should not make anybody equal to God. So we've got heads of religions that are sitting with heads of states. That's a very powerful position to be in. And a lot of people will bow down to that. You don't need that connection for God. You can connect to God yourself. You don't need the estate agent in the middle telling you what to believe or what God's saying. God will talk to you directly. You know, that's the bit that's about to fall and that people are getting a little bit quaky about.
It's interesting, Karen. I mean, I can vouch for the fact that there are unseen forces that are up to no good. I'll tell you a little story real quick. I meditate also, and I guess about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I had myself in a pretty good trance state, and as I'm there meditating, there was this voice that was speaking to me. And at first, you know how it comes sometimes, you are not initially aware of it, then all of a sudden you realize that there's this voice speaking to you, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not you. And so this voice starts speaking to me, and the voice was very, I want to say, very calming and, very friendly at first. So I remember as I was in meditation, I said, well, who are you? And it paused, and it said, I'm a watcher.
Oh, dear.
And I said, so what do you want? And he said to me, I know all the work that you're doing and others that are doing. He says, it's all a waste of time because humanity will never, ever get out from under our control. And that's when I said, this conversation's over. You need to go away. Go away. And he went away. To those that are listening to this, thinking that Mike has lost his mind, unless you experience something like this for yourself, where it's very, very obvious that the voice that's speaking to you is not you. It's almost, how do I explain it? It's a voice with a presence.
Yes. Yep.
Because they want you to understand that it's not you, that there's something there or that they're there and they're speaking to you. And it was a very, very interesting little dialogue we had. It did not last long, Karen, but as you're going through all this, I'm being very quiet because you're my guest, but there's a lot of what you're talking about that I have experienced myself. And so I'm finding this discussion that we're having extremely intriguing.
Well, the other thing to say, of course, is that because people go into fear about it, what he told you is not right, as you know. They're
Right.
banking on ignorance big time because, again, the whole religious thing that comes out. A lot of people got a bit concerned about me a few months ago when they thought that I had fallen into religion. I didn't fall into religion. I began attending a church to understand how people can fall into religion. And part of this whole fallen angel demonic thing is that people don't believe in them. And the whole thing about humanity never waking up, we've won. We won the moment that Christ defeated death. Christ went on the cross, and the whole point of Christ going on the cross was to die and then be resurrected. He then ascended and he walked the planet again. And Christ is due back. Now there's a lot of humming and hawing of how he's going to appear and everything else. And the way that a lot of people are very linear about it, he's not going to appear wearing sandals and a linen tunic. That's the very biblical, defined version of Christ that we have that keeps us in containment. It's the symbology of Christ as well as just the man that was Christ. The reason that a lot of people will use the word God, they will actually use the word Jesus, I've seen quite a lot of channelings using the word Jesus, is the power that's in the word Christ. If you are sitting with an energy and you want to check if the energy's truth or not, just say the word Christ. You will find the energy steps back if it's not truth, because it's almost like saying to them, well, hold on, I know about you. There is nothing that these fallen angels can do to us. They can persuade us. They have no creation rights. When they fell from heaven, God's the only person who has, or the only being that has creation rights. They have no creation rights. So what they do is they tend to promise people things and then change their mind and then put it back on the person that they've not done this well enough, or they're not good enough, or with some excuse as to why it never manifests, because they have no creation rights. They can persuade us that our lives are a certain way. They can persuade us that we're not good enough. They can persuade us it's the end of the world, but they need us to take the physical action to make it happen. So they can be very, very convincing. Now, there is power in the cross. Now, I'm talking about a plain cross, not a crucifix, a cross. People who are visited by these watchers, and they have various other names, need to remember the power in the cross. Jesus already won. The book of Revelations ends with the birth of the new earth and the destruction of the old earth, which is the end of days. It is the end of the control of the demonic forces in respect of the human race. It is God giving back heaven on earth, physically. Now, these incidences of demonic forces are watchers, and there are watchers, and they will visit people. There are certain people who are alive on the planet who are here to help the human race wake up. They will pull out all stops to try and stop you. I've had various ones cross my path. I've had chaos and situations I've put in where people are like, but that's insane. Well, that's a major clue. If there is so much chaos and it can't make sense no matter what way up your picture is, you have a demon who's sitting playing, and they like nothing better than to play. Their whole point of being here is chaos and devilment.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that results in human suffering, human pain, grief and trauma, which they feed from. That's the only way they can survive. And the reason they don't want the human race to evolve is that we are going to move physically into a frequency that is too high for them to interact with us. So they will try and stop the evolution. So all these things that are getting put out just now through various sources, which is like, well, hold on, we're coming up to a portal. Hold on, slow down. Hold on, do this. Hold on, do the next thing. They are trying to put off the inevitable, which is the ascension to evolution of the entire human race. We will move into a dimensional space where they can't walk because everything is frequency, which is why you have areas of the world that the human race can't reach at the moment, because frequency-wise, you're sort of buffered, which is why the flat Earth will gain more and more information as we up our frequency, because they won't be able to keep it contained. The frequency will start breaking down the boundaries they've put up. There's information about mountain ranges. Mountain ranges, as they're telling me or showing me, are something to do with frequency containment. Where you have people sitting in a valley or towns or states in the USA that are surrounded by mountains, the mountains are the edges of the piece of paper, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So if you go up and over the mountain, because I've gone across the USA where I went up and over, you can feel the frequency change. And it's nothing to do with the height that you're driving at. It's the frequency that the area is contained within. So that's part of it as well. But that will start breaking down as the frequency of the human race rises up. But they know that there's nothing they can do, but they're not going to turn around and admit it. They're a bit like bullies in the playground.
Well, yeah, my point with that watcher was, if you're winning, you wouldn't be talking to me.
Exactly.
You know? Because if you were winning,
You've not thought it out pretty well. Okay, so you're telling me who you are so that I'll know who you are the next time you come and try and convince me that I'm not doing what I'm meant to be doing. Okay.
So, Karen, this has been really, really fascinating. It really has been. I really enjoyed this discussion, and you've been so generous with your time. We're an hour and a half into this, and I was wondering if you'd like to come back and connect again and continue the conversation.
Oh, definitely. Yes, I would love to, because it's been a pleasure talking to you, Mike. And as we can see, there's a bigger picture.
There's a much bigger
We just
picture.
need the information coming.
Yeah, and that's how I'm looking at this, because we covered a lot of the foundational information in this particular show. And from here, we'll be able to catapult into the bigger picture and get that to the audience. Yeah, this has been great.
Well, thank you very much for your invitation.
Now, Karen, again, your website is truthcodesministries.com.
It is, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else, any other media or social media that you have that you'd like the audience to know about?
Yes, if you want the blog, it's truthcodes.net. And all the Facebook and the Twitter and everything is referenced on the blog on the right-hand side. And there is a YouTube channel as well where I upload stuff there as well.
Okay, and I'm going to put all of the links into the show notes when I upload the interview to YouTube, so it'll all be there for the audience.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye now. And that concludes my interview with Karen Doonan, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Karen's website can be found at www.truthcodesministries.com, and the link is also included in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com, or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Sometimes I feel so tired, but today I feel so wired. And I look through my crystal ball. All I see is that wall. So many people are standing still, drifting away. They lost their will. I just want to shake them and give them ears. Wake up, stop living in fear. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. Sometimes I feel so cheated, but today I won't be defeated. I cut the chains and I break free. Open your eyes and you will see. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are